Hello everybody, John here from the Sports Department going over the two-game quarterfinal slate for Worlds. It's a two-game slate, so how exciting can it possibly be? But we will talk about what's going on here, and I've brought up the stats for these teams at the World Championship so far. So you're dealing with very small sample sizes. It's important to note the groups that these teams were in because they were in vastly different groups. Some would argue that some of these groups were significantly easier than others. I'm not sure I would necessarily argue that. They were different kinds of groups. For instance, like the T1 group had DFM, which I think was by far the easiest team that you could have had in your group. But at the same time, T1 also had to play EDG, and EDG also had to play T1, which kind of balances that out. Whereas like the RNG HLE group, I don't think they had another team that was on the EDG level of competition, but I would argue that Fnatic is much better than DFM, and so it kind of balances itself out in a way. But the first matchup we have is T1. They're minus 375, and they've gone 5-1 so far at the World Championships, up against HLE, who is plus 255. They are 10-3 so far in the World Championship. HLE is the team to come through play-ins, so they have more games than the other teams here. For people that haven't been following along too closely. GPM numbers: T1 up 1910 to 1823. The GDM plus 342 to plus 129. First blood slight advantage to HLE. First turret huge advantage to T1. Dragon percentage: T1 actually has the advantage, which is a little surprising to me because T1 was absolutely terrible with dragons in the regular season. So this is a good sign for them picking that up. They also have a 5% herald advantage, so doing well on both fronts. T1 with a massive gold lead at 15. Not surprising, T1 does like to lean towards the early game with a lot of their compositions and styles, so plus 36-17 doesn't surprise me too much. At plus 12-38 for HLE. Every team that made the quarterfinals is going to have pretty good numbers when it comes to this kind of stuff, so not super surprising to see that both teams are over 1,000 positive goal differential at 15, especially after such a small sample size of games. KPW DPL-wise, this is the most important thing to note. T1 is by far, of these teams, the lowest KPW DPL team. HLE is quite high, 19 and 19.3. It might be worth just quickly, I don't even remember off the top of my head exactly how bloody these teams were looking in the playoffs. Might be worth taking a look. So let's see, when T1 played Sandbox, they got 22, 22, and then 9, which always throws T1 off. They do have games like that. When they played Gen G, they gave up 16, and then they got 18, 20, and 18. And then in the finals, they got 17 in their one win. They gave up 14, 23, and 24. So they're definitely willing to give up some points in the playoffs. When you go to the regional finals, then we can catch HLE. See how they were looking in the regional finals. They gave up 12, got 17, 25, 18. In the next round, they got 12, 23, 23. And then in the finals against T1, T1 gets 20, 12, and 16. Hanwha with 19 and 20. So pretty large numbers, honestly. In the games, the thing that's always worrying with T1 is that often, even when they get 20 kills, you can see Gumayusi at 406, Carrier at 129. They're a very low kill participation team, and so even when they put up a pretty big number in total kills, it often doesn't really translate to kill participation. For that reason, it's a little worrisome that T1 is by far my highest confidence quarterfinal pick. I think them losing to HLE is near 0% to happen. But it's worrisome from a DFS perspective that this game could be extremely low scoring. They did go to 5 games against HLE in that regional final, but I'd be very, very surprised to see T1 not win this series 3-1 or better. The question is, with those game not playeds and stuff like that, are we going to get the extra value out of them to make it worth being a heavier stack on them? It's a tough call. But T1 by far the team in the quarterfinal that I think is most likely to win. I actually think Cloud9 has a better chance of winning their quarterfinal than HLE. That's just how I feel about it. The other matchup, slightly more interesting, RNG at even money. They went 4-2 in the group stage, up against EDG, who is minus 130. They also went 4-2 in the group stage. For GPM, 1865 to 1831, so a difference but not huge. GDM though, EDG with almost a double. GDM being gold differential per minute for people that don't know how much gold they're gaining on an opponent on average per minute. First Blood goes to RNG by about 24%, and First Turret goes to EDG by 23%. Dragon percentage is nearly identical at 58 and 59. Herald percentage for EDG, 23 points higher though, so advantage for EDG there. At 15 minutes, RNG with plus 1020 to EDG's plus 334, so advantage for RNG at 15 minutes. I will say some of the stats for RNG, including their kill per win and death per loss, which we're going to look at in a second, are certainly inflated by the fact that their group was by far the most, like, the bloodiest group. Playing against HLE, specifically playing against Fnatic, RNG had a 35 kill win against Fnatic, which is why I put note here. It's just worth noting that even though they have a 19.7 kill per win, 3 out of 4 of their games, I believe, were below. Sorry about that. Had a small issue. But yeah, this number is inflated due to the fact that they had the 35 kill win, but they still had a legitimate 20.5 death per loss. So I mean, this lines up with RNG in the regular season. RNG was just this kind of team, and we should expect this to be a pretty bloody matchup. EDG, on the other hand, this is about standard for them through the regular season too. For the LPL, they were a really low blood team. 16.2 and 17 rings about true. I think they were maybe slightly higher and lower, like higher here and lower here in the regular season than they turned out here. The average number of kills in a game between RNG and EDG should be higher than the average number of kills in a game between T1 and HLE. The issue that you come across here is if RNG wins a game with 22 kills and then loses the next game, 20-4, does that balance out for the fact that when T1 gets their win, they're only going to get, 15 kills or whatever on average? Because T1 is much less likely to lose games. I think whether EDG and RNG, I'd be very surprised if it was a 3-0. Like, it seems like it's very likely to be a 3-1, maybe a 3-2. The 3-0 would surprise me either way, whereas T1 is very likely, I think, to go 3-0 or 3-1 at worst. So that's the big question here. Do we put, in a cash lineup, do we put 4 T1 players because they're significantly more likely to win? I think that's the thing to do. It's very hard to predict actual game scoring, and if you have a team that you think is going to be very likely to win in an easier fashion, I think you just play them in cash. Now, that would be different if EDG was like minus 200 here, if they were a significantly bigger favorite, because these games will be bloodier, and if it's pretty likely that EDG wins, or very likely that EDG wins, then maybe you want it. Then I think I would go for EDG. The problem is I'm not that confident that EDG is going to win, and so not only is it possible that T1 would outscore them, it's also much more likely that they lose. So I think I'd be looking to play 4 T1 players if I can, but let's see what's even doable between T1 and EDG, which is obviously in cash the teams that you're going to have to play. It wants you to go with a scout captain. If you're willing to go with, is T1's more expensive, probably, right? Owners 10.5, GG's 10.2, so it's pretty close. Could you get like a Faker captain, or what if we went Faker captain with like owner, Kana, Viper, and Carria? That feels like the cash lineup to me. It wouldn't blow me away to see EDG or to see T1 put in Teddy at some point during the series. It's maybe not the likely thing to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see them mix up their players more so than EDG. So I think putting Viper as your second player is kind of the must in cash. Now keep in mind, we're talking cash here. GPPs, I would be on a 4-stack of RNG or EDG in probably all of my GPP lineups. Maybe if you're on the other matchup, if you want to try to get some leverage, you can go something like 4 HLE. Might be something weird that could be lower owned if you're in a field of like 100. If you're playing a huge field, there's no way to get low ownership on a slate like this, just none. all of these teams are going to be owned. HLE will be the lowest owned team, but even then they're going to be like 10-15% or something, because that's what happens when you have 5,000 people playing a 2-game slate. But if you're in like a 100-person field or something, you could try to get some serious leverage on HLE. A 4-stack of RNG might be something that's kind of low owned. But for cash games, I think I kind of like the 4T1 with Scout and Viper. I think that's kind of the go-to lineup, and almost certainly what I would be playing. The only question I have is just to make sure that Faker, because Owner actually outprojects Faker. He outprojects him by about 4, but Scout and GG goes the other way by almost 6, so you're better off sticking with this version here. I think, let's see, what if we, because of the captain factor, it actually, you might be better off, might be better off going with the jungle captain. So if we did this and we did 4T1 as a lock, EDG as 3 max, it said to use the optimizer settings, took T1 team out. So obviously, sorry, there's some super loud motorcycle for absolutely no reason coming near my house. So it would like the GG version, but actually, this goes 959.2. This version 954.1. Oh wait, this is with Gumayusi though, which we can't do, or I would rather not do. Okay, so 949.7 is owner captain, and then what was the Faker captain version? Faker with Scout, and then switch GG to owner. 953.1. Okay, so the Faker captain is what it ends up coming up with. Okay, so 953.1. That's the one that I'm going to go with in cash. If Ben the Better accepts my thing, this is exactly what I'm going to play. So eat your heart out, Ben the Better. Appreciate you guys. I will talk to you guys later, and I'll be around for the second match in a couple days here. Appreciate you, and have a good one.